Hello everybody, we are continuing with our first round previews. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Edmonton Oilers against the Los Angeles Kings. And before we start, I wanted to say please make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're new to me, new to hockey, whatever the case may be. I'd love to have you here along the way as I try to do this as a career. And we're going to continue on with the fourth video, of course, today, and we are going to put out for tomorrow. So that being said, how did we get here? We got here mainly, I think, for the Oilers with a very hot run since March. Their playoff standings kind of looked a little shaky there, their footing, and then March happened, and since then they've struck gold. In fact, they've gone 18-2-1 and surged into the second spot for the Pacific Division, finishing with 109 points on the season. As for the Kings, they've been kind of humming along nicely. There's been not those crazy long winning streaks, but also the losing streaks have been really not bad at all. In fact, their longest losing streak was just 3 games, and that has happened twice this year. Other teams like Anaheim have had longer losing streaks, I'll just say that. But yeah, this is their first season for the franchise since the 2015-16 season, where they finished with 100 plus points in a campaign, so good for them. And now we're going to get to see these two square off in the first round yet again for the second straight year. And we're also going to see if we will be watching the Oilers win the round again, or if the Kings will get revenge for that 7-game series loss. So, with that being said, what are some storylines to watch out for this series? So, the first one is going to be who steps up offensively for the Kings. We already know that the Oilers have those stars, those big names, and they have guys you expect to go out there and just light it on fire. If they didn't, we'd be more concerned. For LA, it's a little bit more different. The Kings haven't had that McDavid-esque player for a long time, and they've just had a lot of players that have either been good offensively, or they've had guys that have been okay, never great at finishing, whatever the case, maybe not as flashy. And here they are now with this season having Unza Kopitar, their longtime franchise player, being the team leader for points with 74 and 82 games played. You'd imagine he'd probably play a big role in this for them offensively. He's 35. You probably wouldn't want him to have to pull a lot of that weight, but he's a guy that has been just consistent, reliable, such a great, fun player, and a guy you'd love to see, go out there and possibly win a 3rd Stanley Cup. But other than them, I would say another name that comes to mind is Kevin Fiala. That seems quite obvious. It seems a little too obvious, but I do think that's a real name that we could throw out there for the fact that he has 72 points, second on the team in 69 games played. So had he played a full 82 games, he would have definitely had the lead there. But there's more to it than just him being a guy that has a high point per game average. He's a great player off the rush. We've talked about that, especially when he signed with the Kings. And last year, I think part of the reason he didn't have that big playoff series with Minnesota against the Blues that you're hoping for is St. Louis especially had a little bit of heavier guys. They're a little bit more gritty. They wanted to forecheck aggressively, whereas Edmonton, for the most part, isn't too big and invested on the forecheck. And so for Fiala, if he's able to really just not have to deal with somebody up against the boards with you as aggressive as St. Louis was last year, that's great. And the fact that the Oilers have had some issues with zone entries this year is even better, because if you're able to have a little bit of space, gain some momentum, and go up against a team that has been struggling to prevent zone entries into their own end, that could be a recipe for success for Fiala and for the Kings. I'm really excited to see if he's going to be able to have a good playoff series for LA, and I am hoping that he doesn't make me look bad, but we will see for him. Other names that stick out here would probably be the Adrian Kempe, not the, but Adrian Kempe for Kempe for the Kings. Yes, I just lost my place in my notes. But Kempe scored 41 goals this year, and he has been probably the best goal scorer definitely for the last 2 years. In fact, he has 76 goals the past 2 seasons. Kopitar is second on the list, and that is 47. So the gap is pretty big. In general, though, for the Oilers, if you're looking at who you're going to watch out for in this series, if you're thinking those two, And Kopitar, probably going to throw out somebody like Matthias Ekholm. Ekholm is a guy that the Oilers traded for and really hoping for great results, and everybody seems to be excited about it. He is good at preventing zone entries, so especially against Fiala, expect maybe someone like Ekholm to be out there trying to do his darndest to not let Fiala just run rampant off the rush. So we'll see there. But yes, that is the first topic. As for the second, are Blue Jackets fit for Kings? And this is a fun topic for me as a guy that supports the Jackets. The Kings have had some issues, and one of those primarily being goaltending. So they went out and they sold their soul. They traded away their franchise legend, the best goalie in franchise history, Jonathan Quick, to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Of course, he's now in Vegas. He didn't want to be in Ohio. Crazy, right? But for the Kings, they ended up getting Joonas Korpisalo and Vladislav Gavrikov for that trade, and that ended up being a really good thing for them. Joonas Korpisalo, a guy, hasn't really had a lot of success for a little bit now, and I think a lot of people were just really in the spot where they thought he sucked, and I hate to say that word. I probably should have went a different way for the family friendly route, but he stunk, I guess, if you wanted to say that. And for a lot of people, they just thought that was it. His career was over, or at least he looked like he couldn't be a starter. The thing with goaltenders, they tend to play up or they tend to play down to the talent that is in front of them on their lineup or in their lineup. If you have teams that are really bad defensively, like Columbus has been, unless this is a great goalie and you're still asking a lot for a goalie, they're probably going to see a regression in stats. A team like LA that's on the opposite end of the spectrum and boasts a lot of really good defensive metrics, they are going to be in a spot where you would typically see goalies play well. That's why it was so weird that the goalies for the Kings were struggling at points this year and at points in previous seasons as well. Quick, I think, partially was the injuries and the age, and he does play kind of that, just a very physical style for him in net. But you're looking at this, and Korpisalo has a goals against average of 2.13 and a save percentage of .921 since coming over from Columbus. Those are Vezina numbers for a full season. Of course it is. And if he has found a new home in LA, watch out for other teams in the coming years, especially in the Pacific. I'm really happy for him, though, because a lot of people, again, thinking it's done, it's over, might have just found his place where he's going to start for a while. We'll have to see. As for Vladislav Gavrikov, just kind of a, not want to say side piece of the trade, but a defensive defenseman. He isn't going to provide goals, assists, stuff like that, and kind of been a rough year for him in general. Again, you kind of wonder if it's the Columbus effect, but for him, he is a guy that is going to eat up minutes for you. He'll probably block some shots. He'll play some gritty if he needs to, and I would say he probably won't have as big of an impact, but for the Kings, this looks like a really good trade. Again, you're at a spot where you didn't feel like you had competent goaltending, and now you found a guy that's still pretty young at Korpisalo, and maybe he is your goalie for the future. So the Blue Jackets are fit for Kings. Third topic here, switching over. Could this be a high-scoring series? I'm going to go with yes. Edmonton finished first in the league for goals for per 60 with 3.93 per game, and the Los Angeles Kings finished 10th at 3.3. The stakes get a little bit more interesting to here as both sides were electric on the power play. Edmonton had the best power play percentage in the league at 32.5%, and the Kings finished fourth at 25.3%. One good thing for LA, Edmonton does not get on the power play or averages a lot of time on ice per game played compared to other teams. They finished 23rd in the league. The bad thing is, look at who they've got on the power play. Doesn't really take too many opportunities to get goals when they've got extra attackers. But the good news for LA is they were much, much better, I think, compared to last year than, this year where they've had more success on the power play. And I'm just really excited to see if we get to see a great matchup here. I will say part of it, too, could be the fact that these goalies, I'm going to exclude Korpisalo because he hasn't spent enough time with LA in my opinion, but these goalies really did struggle. LA was posting fairly good metrics for PK stats, and their goaltending was just atrocious. But in general, I am hoping that we see terrible save percentage for this series, because if you're going to have one side score a bunch, I'd rather just see both sides score. So if we get a barn burner here, I am just going to be absolutely thrilled. And I'm normally a guy that's like a 3-2, 4-3 is about as far as I go. But if this goes 7-6, I'm okay with it. And so the final thing here that I don't expect to be a big talking point, but I did want to bring it up. I saw this tweet and I just said, we got to run with this. This is too interesting to not bring up, is will the Edmonton Oilers penalty kill score goals? Like plenty of them, because the really weird stat that I found here, which I'm going to talk about one part, but then part two is more interesting, is that the Oilers were the team that led the league in shorthanded goals with 18. Second place teams were the Canucks and the Wild at 14, and then it dropped off to a bunch of other teams at like 11. So clearly there's a pretty big gap for scoring when they're shorthanded. And this is where it gets weird. They played a little over 450 minutes and scored those 18 goals. Really good, of course, best in the league. But when Connor McDavid, who played 104 minutes when he was on the PK, just 104, they scored 8 goals. 8 goals, probably a great correlation here. The other team scored just 9. That is a goals for percentage of 47.1%. Just to give you an idea of how good that is, the Minnesota Wild had the best goals for percentage on the PK at 23.33%, meaning when McDavid's out there on the PK, this isn't always going to hold true because it is a very small sample size, just over 100 minutes, but in total, they were about dead even with the competition, which is great news for any team. You're usually looking at being outscored, 8-1 or something like that, or 5-1, something in that category. So for it to be 1-1, that is a great ratio, but it also means that if the Kings are on the power play where they're feeling good, they're feeling deadly, watch out for McDavid. While he isn't playing a ton of minutes, or he probably won't play a ton of minutes on the PKs, I imagine they'd want him to play in other roles. With this, imagine he'll play a ton of minutes, 5-on-5, even strength, power play, blah, blah, blah. If Edmonton is in this position where they're feeling desperate in a game, watch out for it, because that could be easy goals right there, whether it's him or a pass that he makes. So I think for that is just kind of one of those weird things. 100 minutes, 8 goals to 9, and partially explains why they've had so many shorthanded goals this year. But I am just going to say, I don't want the Kings to get too focused in on this, but at the same time, you don't want to look like a beer leaguer out there when McDavid could do something like this. So, having said all this, in our fourth preview, who am I going to pick in the series? I'm going to pick the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games. This series, I couldn't remember who I picked last year, and is a series I really feel torn on. I think Edmonton having Stuart Skinner to provide that stability in it. I know Jack Campbell was a player. You said hot soup, cold soup, what kind of soup are we going to get? With Skinner, he's really been on fire since March. Maybe his stats aren't, loaded, but again, I went through and I did a video talking about, while he wasn't putting up those Vezina caliber numbers, and they didn't look like traditionally beautiful stats, they're against playoff quality teams and top end teams. 9 out of those 12 teams that he played in March were in playoff spots, I believe, and the other 3 were all in the hunt at the time. So these were not just the Anaheim Ducks, the Columbus Blue Jackets, etc., etc. These were top end teams, and he ended up beating the Bruins, a team that barely lost this year. So for that, and the fact that the Oilers are on a 9-game winning streak going into this and just been so hot now for a month and a half, and have the best player in the world that's having a career year, I have to go with the Oilers. Could the Kings win it? Absolutely. And I think Korpisalo will probably decide that fate, because I imagine that the team in front of him will have their hands full trying to contain Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Zach Hyman, Connor McDavid, and so on. But at the same time, I do think that the Oilers, when push comes to shove, if there's a barn burner in this series or multiple barn burners, who are you going to pick? The team that's got McDavid and all these other guys, or the team that certainly doesn't have bad players, but probably aren't the team that you would expect to score more goals than the Oilers? That's really what it comes down to for me. I am fully prepared to be wrong about this, and I don't know. I don't want to say that I want the Oilers to win. I just hope this is a good series, I guess is all I have to say. But anyway, who do you think will win the series? Why and in how many games? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave them down below. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Check out 4 more previews. All the remaining 4 first-round previews will be up tomorrow, just probably throughout the day. So yeah, it's going to be a busy night tonight. Anyway, everybody stay safe. Have a great night, and you go love hockey, all right? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.